Comment, like, subscribe. The bell keeps you notified. It helps the show thrive. Language is humanity's single greatest creation. It is the thing that separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom and allowed us to thrive and shape societies and communities that we live in today. Though despite how incredible and vital language is, we are still not 100% sure on how exactly the human species acquired this phenomenal skill. What we know for sure is that our biology in our throats and mouths is different enough to the other great apes and animals that allowed us to form sounds and put them into words that we assign meaning to, thus creating language. But beyond that, things are not fully understood. So if we still do not fully understand language in the 21st century, imagine how much more complex and mysterious its origins must have been to those living in antiquity. Ancient people not only couldn't fully explain why they talked, but why people in different parts of the world spoke completely different languages. How could this wonderful skill be explained in a day and age where the human anatomy and science were nowhere near as understood as they are today? Well, thankfully, our ancestors had a very unique way of filling in the gaps in their knowledge. Mythology. Myths and legends are something I really love talking about, and ancient myths cover so much about the world and attempted to explain the unexplainable. Ancient humans formed stories, many of which are believed to have formed from a grain of truth, that explained all kinds of things from why it rained to what would happen when they died. Many cultures across the globe even had mythological explanations for not just the origins of their own language, but why other people across the globe spoke different languages too. These stories are fascinating, and they highlight one of my favourite things about humanity, that being our sheer creativity in the face of attempting to explain the unexplainable. So today I want to highlight some of the really interesting myths from around the world that explain the origins of languages. Perhaps the most well-known of mythological stories in regards to the origin of languages is the story of the Tower of Babel. This story appears in the book of Genesis, so features in Judaism and Christianity. It takes place after the Great Flood, in which Noah and his ark survived as the last people on earth. They eventually settled in Mesopotamia. As they were the only people, they all spoke the same language. In honor of God, the people wanted to build a tower up to them in honor of their protection. The aim of this tower was to make it incredibly tall, so it could reach into the heavens and God directly. Some accounts claim that the aim of making this tower so high was so that humans could be like God, and in turn not need them. Suffice to say, God was not too happy about all of this. God did not want this tower to go ahead, as they felt no human should be able to have the same power as them. God felt like it made the humans arrogant. So to combat the construction of this tower, God suddenly made all the humans speak different languages. Unable to communicate with one another, the humans were no longer able to construct this huge tower, and as they could no longer talk to each other, these humans stopped living together and separated across the world. It's a common belief that the word babble, meaning to talk incoherently, comes from the Tower of Babel, but this isn't actually the case. Babel is thought to come from the ancient Latin babulus, which comes from the ancient Greek barbalos, which meant non-Greek speaker, because non-Greek languages made a savage, incoherent bra 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 sound to Greek speakers. This is, however, where we got the word barbarian from, as initially barbarian just meant any savage who didn't speak Greek. Though of course the Tower of Babel did inspire the name of the Babel fish in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. What's really interesting is that there's actually an identical myth to this from Polynesia. This story tells of a man called Rata who survived a great flood along with his 3 sons. They too built a tower to honour their god of Vatir on the island of Hao. Vatir was too angered by this and broke their tower and changed the way they spoke, once again driving the builders to different parts of the world. We don't seem to know why these stories are so similar. Perhaps there was some kind of connection, or maybe it was just parallel thought. These 2 stories also contain floods, and floods are also a recurring theme in mythologies. This could perhaps be explained by the fact that floods were potentially more prevalent in the ancient world. Because of changing climates since antiquity and human-made flood defences, they do not happen as often now, though they are once again becoming a tad more prevalent in places. One of these flood-related stories comes from the Aztec culture in Mesoamerica. It was said that after a great flood in the land, just two people, a man and a woman, survived floating on a piece of driftwood to safety. They eventually arrived in a new land and had many children together. These children, however, could not speak. They were eventually visited by a magical dove who gave each of these kids different languages. As they could no longer understand one another, they stopped living together and went their separate ways, spreading different languages across the land. The Americas, of course, have a huge amount of native cultures. Each have their own stories in regards to language diversity. The Iroquois myth is that their god directed his people to different lands to live in, which in turn changed the languages that they spoke. The Casca people too have a story of a flood. This one doesn't include a dove, however. It just simply states that after the flood, people got dispersed and began speaking different languages. The Sally Shah myth, however, does involve birds, but not a dove, and nor does it contain a flood. The story revolves around an argument about ducks. People in this community could not agree as to whether the high-pitched sound that ducks made as they flew were due to the flapping of their wings or because of air passing through their beaks. To try and figure this out, the people asked their chief, who also could not figure it out. The chief then asked his council, who also could not figure it out. As this argument grew more volatile in the community, the chief and his council came to a decision to separate people far away from each other. Then these distant groups started speaking different languages. People getting into volatile arguments over trivial matters that get really out of hand due to a bird. Why does that sound so familiar? The Yuki myth tells us that their god created different languages as they created humans too. How he created humans was by laying out sticks that turned into humans at daybreak. With all their languages, they split into different communities. There is another bird-based story, however. That is of the Takuna people. They once all spoke the same language, but one member of this tribe ate 2 hummingbird eggs. And as punishment for eating these eggs, the entire tribe were made to speak different languages. Then we have the Medu people, who too once all spoke the same language, until one night when preparing for a ceremony, everyone started speaking a different language, minus husbands and wives. Their leader, named Kuksu, was able to speak all these languages, and told them to travel the land naming all the animals they found, and form their own communities. Though perhaps the most famous mythology on our planet are the myths from ancient Greece, which the Romans took on as their own too, and then integrated elements of them into Christianity. While it was Prometheus who made humans in Greek mythology, he was not the one who gave them language. Zeus watched over them, but under Zeus's watch, the humans lived without rule and law for years. It was actually the duo of Philarios and Philarion, the god and goddess of ingenuity respectively, who gave humans speech. They, however, spoke just one language for some time. It was then Hermes, however, who gave humans different languages and separated humans into different kingdoms. In Norse mythology, however, it was the sons of Bor who gave humans language, the sons of Bor being Vili, Vir, and the much more well-known eldest son, Odin. These sons, while exploring the land, came across 3 trees, and it was these 3 trees that they formed into humans. Odin, as the oldest, gave them life and spirit. Vili gave them will and feeling, and it was Vir, the 3rd son, who blessed them with hearing, sight, and speech, which in turn gave them language. Though perhaps one of the more gruesome origins of language come from the natives who lived in what we now call Encounter Bay in Australia. In their community lived an old woman called Warori. She was supposedly a mean old woman who would put out fires with her stick as people slept. When she died, people were pretty happy. Everyone came to inspect her body. For one reason or another, one group of people started to eat her flesh. Once they did this, however, they acquired a new language. Then another group ate what was inside her intestine, and they too found themselves speaking a new language. Then a final group ate the intestines themselves, and found them speaking yet another language. Once again, with different tongues from one another and no way to communicate, they separated across the land. A pretty barbaric story, that's for sure. The Makir tribe in India tried to build a tall tower to reach the gods too. However, the gods were unhappy with the humans trying to be like them, so knocked it down and changed their languages. Yeah, once again, this is very similar to the Tower of Babel. The Hindu origin of language has some similarities too, though instead of a building, it involves a tree. In Hindu mythology, there was once a very tall tree tree known as the wisdom tree that grew from the earth's center. This tree grew higher and higher into the heavens, with the intention being that all humans would gather under it and never separate. Brahma, however, was upset with this tree's intentions and cut it down. As the tree's branches fell, they dropped onto different parts of the planet. These loose branches grew into smaller trees, and these smaller wisdom trees gave different languages to the place they grew in. Africa has a really interesting language myth too. It comes from the Wasania, a Bantu group. In their story, a great famine struck their land and drove people to insanity. In search of more fertile lands, the people spread out. As they spread out, they started chanting and muttering strange sounds out of their hunger-induced craze, and it was these chants that became new languages. Though perhaps the most well-known of language in the ancient world is that of the ancient Egyptians, and its written form of hieroglyphics. These pictographs were thought to be the language of the gods given to the humans. They are ultimately thought to have been created by their god of wisdom, Thoth. They were then spread to the people of ancient Egypt and remain today on our planet as ancient relics. So yeah, some of these stories might sound a little strange and crazy to our modern ears, and there are many I haven't talked about. But you must remember, we have a much larger scope of knowledge and understanding thanks to the advancements in science and technology that these ancient people simply didn't have. Without the knowledge that we have, people conjured up stories of great gods gifting or cursing them with language, or floods that separated people, and even the occasional instance of cannibalism. But honestly, how else in ancient times could you possibly explain something as magical as language? Name Explained depends on viewers like yourself supporting the channel financially on Patreon, so a huge thank you to everyone who does. Donating just $1 a month helps the channel amazingly and gets you bonuses including ad-free videos, exclusive content, and the power to request ideas to be made into actual Name Explained videos. $2 a month gets you all that, plus your name here with all these awesome people. Visit patreon.com/nameexplain or click the link down below to find out how you too can support the channel. Thank you. Thanks for reaching the end of the video. Why not watch another and subscribe to keep up to date on all things Name Explain. You can find myself on Instagram where I'm NameExplainYT, and join the Facebook group Friends of Name Explain to talk with myself and other name nerds. All that will be linked down below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and once again, thank you all so much.